collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, a noisy demonstration outside the House of Representatives protesting against the illegal construction of villas on the sensitive sea caves in the Pea area of Paphos.
Once more we're seeing that the law that should be applied and the particular protective measures that should be in place for designated Natura 2000 areas is just not being applied. And all the signs are that, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a special treatment being given to a huge developer, a huge investor, who is basically being allowed to go ahead. He's building as we speak.
The Scientific and Technical Chamber, EdTech, also believes that something needs to be done about that area of the coastline.
First, we want to stop any development there, and we have the opinion that the government should review all the situation there and take the right decisions even now.
And we talk at length to the former EU Commissioner for the Environment, Janez Potočnik, about economic transition and the circular economy.
Humanity is for the first time in the history living in the socio-economic space of planetary scope. We are so interconnected, so interdependent, that we can clearly understand that our individual and collective responsibility for our joint future, for our collective future, has enormously increased.
The sound of a noisy demonstration outside the Houses of Parliament on Wednesday, when environmental groups and other concerned citizens gathered to demonstrate against the development of villas in the sea caves area of Pea near Paphos. It's a Natura 2000 site and a very important area for the highly endangered Mediterranean monk seal. They banged their drums, blew their whistles, and were faced by a line of riot police. Among the crowds, I found the head of BirdLife Cyprus, Martin Helikar, and asked him what was going on. So, Martin, you've joined the throngs outside Parliament today. Tell us what the feeling is. It's obvious that people are very angry.
Yeah, there's a very good crowd here and a very strong feeling. There's basically all the environmental organisations and groups in Cyprus represented here, and BirdLife Cyprus has come along as well. The issue here is, A, the wider issue of agamas and the continuing failure of the state to properly protect and manage this unique, this fantastic site. And the particular issue that we're protesting about today is a development in the sea caves area of Pea, which is one of the last remaining refuges for the Mediterranean monk seal, which is about as threatened as you get in terms of species in the Mediterranean. It's a designated Natura 2000 area, so under the law, at least on paper, it's protected. It is also protected for birds. It's an important migration corridor along that very lovely coastline there. And what is happening, unfortunately, is that once more we're seeing that the law that should be applied and the particular protective measures that should be in place for designated Natura 2000 areas is just not being applied. And all the signs are that, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a special treatment being given to a huge developer, a huge investor, who is basically being allowed to go ahead. He's building as we speak without having licenses. So it's a genuine environmental scandal, and I'm delighted to see so many people here protesting about it, and disappointed to see that we've had no representation so far from Parliament to come and hear our position.
And of course they are all inside Parliament today, I think, aren't they? Because the President is addressing them as he takes his second term of office. Are you going to hang around here and hope that at least some MPs, if not the President himself, will come and talk to you afterwards? Because the cordon of police is making sure that the demonstrators can't get anywhere near the House.
Yeah, a rather excessive reaction of the police. I don't think we need riot shields today. This is a very peaceful, good-humoured protest, as you've seen, being here with the crowd. So to be standing opposite, grim-faced with riot shields is a bit ridiculous. But anyway, that aside, that's not a key thing. The key thing is that there have been a couple of MPs, Mr. Berdigis, Mr. Theobentou, who have come down and joined the protesters and got the vibe and spoken to people. But I think really any serious body representing the electorate should be coming down, sending representation or inviting a representation up to have a discussion and hear our concerns about this very serious issue. And that's not happening, and that's very disappointing.
The House Environment Committee surely should be asking you to come and explain your concerns.
Yeah, absolutely, at the very least. I mean, this is being discussed at the Environment Committee, but our concern is that the procedures will not be carried out to the full. It's not a finished case, but I stress again, what is happening in reality is that the bulldozers are in there starting to build these massive developments along the coast even before the licenses have been issued, and that's really the crux of the scandal we're looking at here today.
That's Martin Helikar, the Chief of BirdLife Cyprus.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
And staying with that environmental protest, earlier in the week the island's Technical and Scientific Chamber, ETEC, had criticised the construction of those villas in the Paya Sea Caves area, describing it as a crime that started 20 years ago. I met up with the Technical Chamber's head, Stelios Achniotis, who filled me in on the background.
This issue came on display in 1996, when the zoning, the development zoning at that area changed, and they gave the right for some development for touristic villas. So the chamber at that time expressed its concerns, great concerns, due to the character and the environment, the sea caves there. So we are opposed on that change of the zoning.
And I think you took it to court.
Yes, actually after the first demonstrations, the first expression of our concerns, and since we didn't get some right responses, we went to the court. We applied to the court, but the Supreme Court decided that ETEC has no right to
mess in the zoning, basically.
Yes, to express lawfully the opinion, not only the opinion, but to say we want not to proceed that change of the zoning.
Right, now, ETEC is basically engineers.
Yes.
So what is it? It's not just the environmental issue. The pictures we've seen of the villas that are going up on top of those sea caves, from an engineering point of view, are they safe? Because we've had cases all across the globe where strong storms can undermine the actual structure of those caves, and the whole lot might fall into the sea.
Okay, I'm not in a position to say where the caves go in, how many depth, and
how far back they stretch underneath the villas.
Yes, but our concerns are from the environmental and the change of generally of the environment. So we didn't accept at that time that change. So now we are in a difficult position because some development is going on, and our opinion is that the government should review again that.
It's a bit late now. They've started building, isn't it? Are you hoping that they won't allow any more building?
First, we want to stop any development there, and we have the opinion that the government should review all the situation there and take the right decisions even now.
Well, I think the people who were demonstrating outside Parliament on Wednesday were outraged. I mean, if we look at the coastal area from Paphos up the coast towards Paya and Ayos Yorios, we've already wrecked it, haven't we? It used to be a pristine beautiful natural environment, and now it's just full of hotels and villas, tacky tourist shops, and this is just spreading it even further on a very sensitive area.
Yes, you are right. The area there is extremely beautiful, somebody can say. And I think that the whole master plan of the area should consider that as a very valuable asset to us and the generations to come. So we have to protect that area, even at this time.
Can I just ask you as well, I mean, we talk and we hear a lot of talk about the Agamas National Park.
Yeah.
And we've seen the Environment Ministry recently talking to the local residents of the villages in that area who themselves say it's not fair, we're not being allowed to develop. And the last I heard, there was talk of limited development. Is that the thin end of the wedge as well there? Do you think that that is going to open the door, if you like? Because limited development, we've seen it with single kiosks close to beaches, and then suddenly a road is built, and so on and so forth.
Okay, it's a key question, I can say that. But on the other hand, we can accept that people can visit that area. So they need some limited facilities.
But it's how you build those facilities, isn't it? And how accessible
to
you make them.
comply with the environment, respect the environment, and of course not allowed to be something more than that.
Is there anything that ETEC can do in these circumstances? Presumably because of the court ruling that you mentioned at the beginning of our chat, they're telling you to mind your own business, basically, aren't they?
At that time they said so, that we have no right to interfere. But life is not so solid. I mean, life is something which must change, and according to the considerations people can have at each stage, should respond. The government must respond to those concerns. We are not in the 90s. We are in the 21st century. We are part of the European Union.
And we're also, I think, there is some legislation, I'm not sure if we've actually signed it, about protecting the coastline. We haven't even mentioned that. Can you tell us what that's about?
Actually, this direction, let's say, is about the protection of the coast shores. And of course, even though Cyprus didn't yet sign that, is there, and
they are obliged to as members of the EU.
We have the obligation to comply.
So we might just be seeing the fact that they're doing nothing at the moment until the thing is a fait accompli, and then we'll go ahead and sign the Barcelona Protocol after it's too late.
I think that if we are not signed yet that protocol, we should comply with the content of that.
So that we should be actually implementing the thought behind it, even if we haven't legally signed the letter of the law.
Exactly. That's the typical step. The substance is to comply to that.
Well, if you were with me, you'd see that Stelios is smiling a little ironically as he says that. He is the president of the island's Technical and Scientific Chamber, who have joined the calls to halt the development on the sea caves in the Pea area of Paphos. Let's see what's going to happen.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
The 2018 Hubert Curien Memorial Lecture was held last week at the Cyprus Institute, and the speaker was Dr. Janez Potočnik, who's a former EU Commissioner for the Environment. He was talking, though, because he has a background in socio-economic areas and the economy, about economy transition and the role of the circular economy. Now, we keep hearing about the circular economy. It's the new buzzword in a way. Does this mean that the economic model that we've currently got isn't working?
The model which we currently got has delivered us a lot of good. So a lot of people are now living better than they did in the past. But the fact is that there are a lot of side effects of the current model, which we can in particularly see in degradation of environment, also in various kind of impacts on human health, which we can also see it in a distribution of welfare, which we can also see it in the economic model itself, that it's not stable, and we see that it's running into bubbles and crises from time to time. So it is clear that there is a need that we would change the current economic model and convert it into more sustainable from economic, social and environmental point of view. And I think if we take seriously the Sustainable Development Goals, to which we have all only recently committed, this would be a kind of economic model which would be consistent with Sustainable Development Goals. So yes, my message was exactly that, that the current economic model has too many side effects, which are obvious and needs to be addressed, and so there is an economic opportunity to change that.
And how do we go about changing that? You talk about economy transition. It's not easy when pretty well the current model is widespread everywhere. Yeah. And there'll be, I presume, from businesses, a fair amount of kickback against the idea.
There will be a fair amount of kickback of the idea, but there will be a fair amount of people who will understand that any transition is a major opportunity for those who dare, who innovate, who look ahead for new jobs, for different kind of jobs. That's what it's all about. So, here the questions which we are dealing with are relatively common sense and logical. People actually don't need light bulbs, they need light. We don't actually need cars, we need mobility. And in that logic, many of those things, if they are organized, we can save a lot of resources. We can also organize all the production systems which would be much more in line with protecting the environment, which is not today the case. And that's in essence the whole story. So the whole story is that this change is actually inevitable. So we like it or not, it will happen. The real question is only either we will organize ourselves in a way that we would transit to that state in a more comfortable way, which actually means exactly what you said, that of course in the transition some will also lose. But it is clear that since a lot of investment decisions in the past were done in good faith, that we need to help those people. We need to make that transition fair, just, possible. But at the same time, since it is necessary and unavoidable, we need to make these opportunities which are existing visible. And I can guarantee you that I know number of companies which are understanding that story very well, which are very well already going in that direction and see that as a major future development opportunity.
A lot of people perhaps don't understand what you mean by a circular economy, because we've had the green economy. I think they're probably connected to a large degree. But how would you define a circular economy?
They are connected, and a lot of different kind of, if you say, buzzwords were used. What we all mean is that we need to make the current economic model more sustainable from economic, social, and environmental point of view. The definition of the circular economy, it's relatively simple. It's how to keep various types of resources in the production and consumption system as long as possible, and how to keep their value as high as possible. So saving the resources, diverting from consumerism, which we are all used to at this very moment, and trying to reorganize in a way. Either you design the product in a different way, or you have organized a different kind of business model instead of owing to a sharing direction. Either you organize a production process in a different way, either you try to influence on the capacity of consumers that they do better understand how their decisions really matter. And all that is possible. So there is no clear recipe which one would follow, because in each environment this could be organized in a different way. But we know that some of those instruments are working better than others. Some which I have already mentioned, the business models, the extended producer responsibility, where the producer is actually responsible for the fate of the product till the end of life of the product.
And that's already happening to some degree, isn't it?
Yes, it is happening. So in many cases we have a lot of good examples. So the real question is how to mainstream it and how it would replace the currently still prevailing old logic, which is all across the economic space. And that's actually the real challenge. Not that we would not know what to do, but the thing which actually you mentioned yourself, how to replace the existing investments, the stranded assets, the stranded investments with the things which we believe that they are necessary and unavoidable and would do good for the future development of the humanity.
But the bottom line for businesses, of course, is to persuade them that they can still make a profit doing this.
Of course, that's absolutely clear. But that means that it will not work well if they will put all the eggs in the basket of defending their current profits and current economic model and so on. No, on the contrary, they have to understand that the challenges which we as a humanity are facing, from the climate change, the disappearing biodiversity, from the polluted air in the cities, to the social distribution of welfare and so on, are so serious that if we don't address them, we will all collectively run into huge problems. Humanity is for the first time in the history living in the socio-economic space of planetary scope. We are so interconnected, so interdependent, that we can clearly understand that our individual and collective responsibility for our joint future, for our collective future, has enormously increased.
And I think people do nowadays understand more that the decisions each person takes, even in the supermarket, can have an impact on people on the other side of the world.
Exactly. And I think that's also part of the strategy, how to make people more aware that any step they take, any decision which they take, it's actually influencing on overall economic business model and also how we behave via the future. And in many cases, the problem is that a lot of natural resources are simply not valued, which means if you don't value something, then of course there are no costs associated with that. We call it in economy environmental externalities, which means that these are the costs which are existing, but in a way we deny them. They are not paid by the producer and consumer, but they are paid by somebody else, for example, by a person whose health was affected by those decisions. Or normally they are paid by the next generations from a simple reason, because they cannot complain. So we indebt the future generations. While we have, for example, in Europe, clear rules that we should not indebt ourselves when it comes to financial, budgetary issues, we don't have clear rules that we should not indebt ourselves when it comes to environmental issues. And these are difficult questions, and we will have to go quite in depth to the essence of the economic model to change the reality.
Do you think it is possible, though, for the people who don't understand, or sadly many of them just don't care about the impact that their day-to-day decisions have? How do we get that message across to them? Is this something governments have to do in schools? I know the media can do a lot, but you do have to persuade them that every item that they use has some sort of an impact.
You're right. Either you do that in an organized way, so through the educational system, through the media, through clear political messages, or basically the reality will taught us. You can see that, for example, Cape Town is running out of drinking water. You can see the extreme weather events which are increasingly becoming our part of reality. So you can see that Chinese authorities have in a moment some years ago closed 2,000 factories around Beijing because of the polluted air in Beijing. So this is all a reality which we are already seeing. So I think it's much better if we raise awareness and if we educate people, and that we all together start to understand how those things do really matter for the quality of our life which we are enjoying. And if we understand that better, of course, then we will still be in a position that we avoid the trends which we are already seeing. In particular, they are visible in connection to the climate change. And that's why it is important to join the forces on a global level, but also on a local level, to tackle those problems.
Are you optimistic?
I'm an optimist by nature, but frankly, many times humans are acting when they are exposed to serious challenges. And we are not far away to be exposed to that kind of challenges. So I think it's high time to act.
And that was the speaker at last week's 2018 Hubert Curien Memorial Lecture at the Cyprus Institute, the former Commissioner for the Environment of the EU, Dr. Janez Potočnik. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.